welcome you to the 513th in our series of distinguished speaker programs. I'm Cindy O'Connell, and I am thrilled and honored to be your club president. I'd like to recognize some very important guest artists from last night's TSO performance. Norm Schenkel, Brianna Hunter, Christina Pierre, and conductor Darko Buteraz. Please stay with us. Now, on my far left, our club member that really helped make all this happen, and we're so delighted with that. Let me turn my page. It's Mandy Stringer. Mandy, Dr. Amanda Stringer, has been CEO of the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra since 2010. During her tenure, the TSO budget has grown 93%. Corporate sponsorships have increased 266%. I think you need her on your fundraising team. I'm sorry, she has a steady job. And individual contributions have grown 51%, enabling the orchestra to diversify its musical and educational offerings to serve more and more people in this great community. And we thank you, Mandy, for making this possible. And now I will give you the honor of introducing our guest speaker.
Today's guest, Jessie Rosen, is President and CEO of the League of American Orchestras, the only national organization dedicated solely to the work and advancement of orchestras in this country. Affectionately referred to as the League by member constituents such as myself, the League is the field's most important source for gathering and disseminating data pertaining specifically to orchestras, advocating in Washington, training leaders in the field, and providing invaluable networking and sharing through its annual national conference, a gathering of over 1,000 orchestra stakeholders from all over the United States each June. Mr. Rosen has been president and CEO of the League since 2008, and I learned today he's been with the League for how many years? 20? 20 years. And under his leadership, the League has enjoyed renewed focus on developing longitudinal research benefiting the entire orchestra field, and has created new programs and initiatives in the areas of artistry, leadership development, governance, capitalization, and community engagement. Under his direction, the League has been a catalyst for the orchestra field's collective action around diversity, equity, and inclusion, including a drive to increase participation of musicians from underrepresented communities. Jessie is a leading voice for the League's more than 2,000 member organizations and individuals, empowering us with knowledge and perspective to navigate a rapidly changing environment. As a member of the League for over 10 years and having benefited immensely personally from its educational, networking, and advocacy opportunities, it is my pleasure to welcome Jessie to our community and have him as our guest here at the Florida Economic Club. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jessie Rosen.
Lovely to be here in the Sunshine State, I'm told. It's my first time in Tallahassee, but not my first time in Florida, but I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for including me on your program. I thought I would talk a little bit about the arts and the economy globally, and then kind of drill down into Florida, into this county, and then look at what's happening to orchestras across the country right now, and then zero in on your orchestra, the Tallahassee Symphony, and talk a little bit about how they fit and the unique role that they're playing in the wider landscape of orchestras in America. So just to start, we're going to look at a lot of numbers. And this is data on the entire arts and culture sector in the United States. And as you can see, $804.2 billion added to the U.S. economy. That's 4.3% of our GDP. And there's a little reference point there just to get a comparative sense about how big that is. It's 5 times bigger than the agricultural sector. So arts and culture are a very substantial part of our economy. And the arts and culture sector is growing at a rate, double the rate of the U.S. economy, at over 4% per year, more than the 2% per year of the U.S. economy. And in Florida, 7.1% is the annual growth rate. So this state is among the top states in its growth in its economic activity. And the arts and culture business is good for trade. It's a $25 billion trade surplus, and that's a 12-fold increase over the last 10 years. So this is a big piece of economic activity in America. Now, to take another look, this is the nonprofit arts. The prior slide, that was a look at, everything. So it's orchestras and operas, but also television, design, architecture, all the commercial components of the arts. Here's just the nonprofit sector, arts sector, which you can see is a $166 billion economic activity. And you look at its impact, the full-time equivalent's over 2.3 million people employed, $49 billion in household income, and revenue generated for government over $15 billion. So this is the nonprofit side. So these are your orchestras, your opera companies, your nonprofit theaters, and so on and so forth. So now we'll look at Leon County, which is also doing extraordinarily well with over $200 million of direct expenditures in arts and culture, and over 7,000 people employed, $125 million household income, and then you can see the amount of revenue generated to government, both at the local level and the state level. So let's take a look at orchestras now. So 1,200 orchestras in the United States, and that's adult orchestras, and another 400 youth orchestras. And we're a $1.8 billion business, and for a point of reference, that's about the same size as online dating. A little bit different activity, but similar in its economic scope. And 105,000 musicians, 28,000 performances, 25 million people go to concerts every year, and another 40 million Americans listening to classical music on the radio, online, streaming, downloading, all manner of electronic media. I did an interview this morning with Tom Flanagan at the WFMU, and is it WFMU?
WFSU.
FSU, sorry. So, he said something, a lot of people said, well, orchestras are doing so badly. And I said, no, they're not. 25 million people going to concerts, 40 million people listening on the radio. Anyhow, this is a very robust part of arts activity in our country. And here you can take a look and see how they're spread out across the country. There are orchestras in 365 congressional districts, and this is very important for our work at the League. We have 2 lobbyists working on behalf of our field in Washington, and we're able to draw upon our constituency, which are in fact the constituents of so many members of Congress, which is extremely helpful in our work. Here you can take a look. This little pie chart just depicts the revenue that accrues to orchestras, and really it's our business model. So you can see the sources of income that orchestras acquire in order to run their businesses. And so 36% is performance income. That's a slice up there on the right side. And then private support, 33%, 3% government, and then 19%, which is endowment support, which is also another form of contributed income that goes to orchestras. And the norm across our field now is about 35% earned income from selling tickets, selling the services of the orchestra, and the balance of that that makes up the pie is contributed income. And that's a mix, by the way, that has changed dramatically over time. If you go back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, orchestras were earning about 95% of their income through ticket sales. And over this period of time, we've seen that shift dramatically. And actually, the very first public reference to the demise of American orchestras was in 1902, when the Boston Symphony, their earned income dropped from 97% to 95%. And so everyone was dismayed. The end is near. We're not going to have orchestras in America anymore. Anyhow, we're down to 35% earned income, and we're still going strong. Anyway, that's a lot about numbers and economics, and so, we're not in the business of money in orchestras. We're not here to create shareholder value. We're not here to generate income or to have economic impact. It's important that we do, but that's not why we exist. So what is it that really matters? Some of you may know this quote from President Kennedy: "I'm certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over our cities, we too will be remembered, not for victories or defeats in battle or in politics, but for our contribution to the human spirit." And there's a wonderful philosopher at the University of Chicago, Martha Nussbaum, who builds on this idea a little bit. And she talks about how the arts and humanities yield daring imagination, empathetic understanding of human experience of many different kinds, and understanding of the complexity of the world that we live in. So it's this higher calling that we're part of in music and in orchestras and in the arts. And let's kind of drill down a little bit into how that actually works and what's going on with what we do. So I suppose probably stating the obvious, but we express feelings when music is written and performed. And you know, orchestras are kind of unique in this regard. There are a lot of different kinds of music in the world, a lot of different kinds of arts. You know who I work for, so I'm partial to the symphony orchestra. And I don't want to claim it's better than any other art form, but I'll tell you this: I don't know how many other art forms you can think of that are deployed in a lot of other art forms. So the orchestra shows up in opera, it shows up in ballet, it shows up in musical theater, it shows up on television, it shows up in film, and this is not just the United States, this is all over the world, the whole planet. So what's going on with that? I mean, the orchestra is like an amazing thing. This combination of instruments, that's 46 strings and, I don't know, 20 woodwinds and the percussion. There's something about this combination of instruments that yields such an unbelievably rich, expressive palette. And it's not like a marching band. I love marching band. I played in marching band. But it's really different what you can accomplish with an orchestra. And that's why it's the ensemble of choice for so many creative people, from entertainment to all kinds of things. So it's a great thing, the symphony orchestra. So also, what is it? We bring people together. Bringing people together today is a really important thing to do. We live in a world where coming together live, it just doesn't happen so much anymore. I have a friend, he's a journalist, and he's convinced we're at the beginning of an analog revolution, which would be a really welcome thing. Everything we do is so digital, through our screens, coming out, sitting next to another person, experiencing something together is a very important thing to happen in our lives, and orchestras do that. Also, the experience reminds us of our heritage. We come from places. And music is a way of connecting with that heritage. Very, very important role it plays. We bridge cultures. So on the one hand, we are reminded of where we come from. We're also introduced to other cultures, other ways of people experiencing their lives and expressing themselves. And tremendous promotion of child development and workforce development. The amount of research that correlates the impact of art education and successful learning outcomes is just overwhelming. I won't even bother to cite any of it because there's just so much of it. But kids who are involved in the arts do better in school, they have higher graduation rates, they master their skills at greater rates than kids who don't. And, at a time when artificial intelligence seems to be a real thing and getting to be more and more of a thing, our human attributes of creativity and expression are so essential for the work ahead of innovation. And the arts do that. The arts are highly correlated to creativity and innovation. And then lastly, community development. The arts make for communities people want to live in, they want to move to. Public and private sector want to invest in communities that have arts activity. It's part of what makes healthy cities. So let's look at what's happening with orchestras today. Everything so far sounds really good, but there's a lot happening for us. So big demographic change is affecting symphony orchestras. Audience is aging. There used to be a myth in our field that the audience was always old. And as recently as 10 years ago, there were colleagues of mine who they would say, we're not going to have enough seats for all those old people. Because when the baby boomers are all going to turn 55 and they're all going to start coming to concerts. Well, guess what? They didn't. And all the research we have shows the audience used to be a lot younger and it's getting a lot older. So that's an issue. Audiences are changing. People don't like to buy subscriptions a year in advance, pin their lives down, that far in advance. Even the definition of, what's a satisfying performance experience is changing. Arts education, we've got way less of it than we used to have. And what we do have is shifting. So there's increasing concentration of arts education in affluent communities and less in underserved communities. Big problem for us. And then digital technology. Many wonderful things about it, but if you're in a business like ours where you tell people, here's the content you're going to get, and if you want to get it, you better show up when we're giving it, you're kind of swimming upstream today because digital technology makes it possible for everyone to curate their own content and to have it whenever they want it. So that poses some issues. And then our communities want different things from nonprofits. Not enough to just do what you do. You need to contribute. You have to do something to make your community better and stronger. And then finally, philanthropic priorities are shifting in numerous ways, not the least of which, so there are many, many different types of arts organizations now vying for philanthropic support. All of these external phenomena make challenges for our field. So what do we do? I'm guessing some people here play golf. Yeah? Okay. So I don't know anything about golf, but I'm going to tell you some things about the U.S. Golf Association, because I pay attention to associations, so I run an association. So there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal some years ago about what was going on in golf. So the golf community was having some issues because younger people weren't playing golf. A lot of golf courses were closing. They felt really threatened. So in the golf community, according to this article, there were factions. There were the traditionalists, and then there were the progressives. And the progressives wanted to change a lot of things up. So, one of the changes was to expand the size of the hole to 15 inches. Because if you do that, the game will go a lot faster, and people will be a lot happier. They have like a really good time. And the next thing they want to do is serve alcohol out on the golf course because people like to drink. And along with this, there was also you shouldn't begin selling time on the golf course in 3-hole increments because everyone's so busy. Who has time to do 18 holes of golf? And then this most recent one is a headline from the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago. You can have your loved ones interred on the green, and you can even have a cremation ceremony. So why am I telling you all this? So this is what's going on in orchestras. We're having these conversations. I mean, it's not quite so extreme, but we're trying to figure out how do we adapt to this changing world, but also how do we bridge, how do we stay connected to the things that really matter to us. In the golf world, the traditionalists were saying, yeah, all that stuff, that's fine, but it's not golf. Golf is slow. That's what makes it golf. And it is hard. You have to make a commitment to do it. That's what defines as golf. So in orchestras, people are asking, well, what is it that we have to hang on to? What defines us? And what can we let go of? Because it gets in the way of our adapting to the world today. So if you'll indulge me, there's a couple more pictures. This is Severance Hall. This is a concert hall the Cleveland Orchestra plays, and it was built in 1931. And you can see neoclassic architecture made out of granite and concrete. I don't know if you can see in this photograph, but it's elevated. It's kind of like the Parthenon, so you'd be like closer to the gods and lifted up from the pedestrians. Glorious, wonderful, stunning concert hall. This is another concert hall. This was built in 1911. This was 2011. The architect is Frank Gehry. And on the left-hand side of the facade of that hall, it's all glass. and you can see straight into the performance spaces, into offices, and lobbies, and what have you. The right side of the facade is just a wall, but what you're looking at is what they call a wall cast, where they are projecting a concert taking place inside that's being projected out onto the wall, and then people come and hear the concert from outdoors. So in these two pictures, you kind of have a look into the change that's going on in orchestras. The first picture, that's a building designed to protect, to keep the outside from getting in. Make sure what you have in sounds really great and nothing gets in the way. This is a picture that says transparency and accessibility. You can see through us, and anyone can access what we have. And it's been part of a big mindset shift in our field as we think about how we navigate all of these changes. And it's moving from this focus on what we do inside to how we connect with the outside, and how that connection kind of adds energy and excitement and relevance to what we've been doing in the past. So to take this idea a little bit further, I want to talk about the Tallahassee Symphony, because they have played a really, really important role in advancing some of these changes taking place in our field. So, as you heard from Cindy, the Tallahassee Symphony, this is a thriving operation. It's growing in every important way. The orchestra has a budget of about $1 million, which, by the way, places it in a group of, that is about 90% of all the orchestras in America have budgets under $1 million. Your symphony orchestra, we think, Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall, these big, giant structures, big, expensive operations. The vast majority of orchestras in America are just like Tallahassee in terms of its size. And the orchestra does all kinds of things. They have their classical series, but they're also playing education concerts, family concerts, outdoor pops concerts, so on and so forth, and a wonderful partnership with Florida State University. So yesterday, they did something really unusual and really important, which was a program they called Ode to Understanding. And for those of you who weren't there, just to describe simply, two major pieces were performed. One was the Beethoven Ninth Symphony, and the other was a relatively new piece, 2 years old, called The Seven Last Words of the Unarmed by a young black composer named Joel Thompson. And playing the Beethoven Ninth Symphony is not a radically new idea. In fact, it happens all the time. Orchestras do it because people love it, and a lot of them come and sell out of tickets. But one of the things that happened in the program of the Beethoven Ninth Symphony was, here's a staple of our repertoire, a canonic work, all of a sudden takes on a new meaning because of what it's paired with. So the Beethoven Ninth Symphony is dubbed the Ode to Joy. It has Schiller's poetry, All Men Are Brothers. It's one of the great human expressions of brotherhood and the importance of man connecting to man and women to women. But now you're hearing it after having experienced a work that was written in recognition of 6 black men shot by police officers. So how do you make sense of Beethoven after this work about a very painful, anguish-filled experience that's running through America today? So in the pairing of these two works, what the Tallahassee Symphony is doing is they're saying, we can continue to play Beethoven, but we're going to reimagine Beethoven. We're going to experience it in a different way with new insight. We'll give new life to the Beethoven Ninth Symphony. This idea of reimagining our past through today's lenses is one way orchestras adapt. Another, of course, is this work itself by Joel Thompson, which, is a highly, highly relevant work. And it confronts an issue that is very, very hard for everyone to deal with and come to some shared understanding around. But you can safely say that the idea of police and race and how they intersect, that's a phenomenon running through American life today, and takes up the American conversation. It's a huge piece of what Americans are trying to sort out, whatever side you come down on. But here's Tallahassee Symphony saying, yes, we have a role to play in this conversation. This really matters. And we have something we can do to contribute to our community working its way through these really, really tough issues. And so they're establishing a new kind of relevance for the orchestra in this community. There's also a huge element of risk here. And the reference was made to this earlier, and as I spent the day here yesterday and talked to many people, and this was a surprise to me how risky it was for the orchestra to do this. Not everyone thought this was a great idea, and people have a lot of different sharp feelings and emotions about the incidents of police and black men being shot. And so the Tallahassee Symphony decided, in the face of all those risks and how people would react, that it was the right thing to do. And risk-taking is another hugely important piece of an adaptive strategy to deal with the changing world. I mean, you can't change, you can't adapt, and just keep doing the same thing over and over again. We know that. But in order to change, you have to take some risk, which also requires a lot of courage. Another feature of the program was the partnerships with Morehouse College, Florida State University, Florida A&M, and the Village Square. And when orchestras partner with other organizations, part of what that accomplishes is new creative possibilities that they couldn't otherwise do. And that certainly, we heard that in abundance yesterday afternoon. But it also brings new constituents, people who follow those partner organizations, but now they come to be part of you and what you're doing and what you're about. And I was told last night that yesterday's concert generated 1,000 new names to the database of the Tallahassee Symphony. That's a lot of names. There's 1,000 people who did not have a relationship before. And so those partnerships, the relevance, these are things that bring people out. They want to be part of what you're doing. And then finally, the concert was live webcasted. Is that how you say that? Streamed, live web streamed. So using technology to reach more people and to create more access for what the orchestra is about. So, in every respect, I'll show you this. This is a photograph. Some of you may have seen pictures in the paper this morning. This was a discussion that took place after the performance of the Joel Thompson piece. And I go to a lot of concerts. I've never seen a sheriff in uniform on stage at a and that's Walt McNeil, your county sheriff. You all know that. But I mean, here he was talking to Joel Thompson, the composer, and the two board members from the Tallahassee Symphony. And the guy in the furthest right, whose name I don't recall, is here. He's here. So it was a really interesting conversation. And remind me your name again. I'm sorry.
Patrick Slug.
Yeah. So Patrick, can I say a little bit what you said? So Patrick comes. He's from New York, so I come from New York. But he comes from a family of cops and described his own kind of evolution in his thinking and feeling about this piece. And that's what music does. I mean, it invites you into another perspective. It allows you to see things, feel things in a way you haven't felt them or thought about them before. Really a wonderful discussion. Before I get to the last thing I want to say, maybe we should just take a moment and acknowledge and thank everyone from the Tallahassee Symphony, Mandy and Darko, and everyone from the board and friends who's here. Can we just stand up so we can all... Okay, so the last thing is just to say that there's a role for all of you to play your part in the Tallahassee Symphony and in the arts. And this data comes from a 2018 report from the Conference Board on business participation in the arts. And as you can see, 92% of businesses are contributing and supporting the arts. 79% believe the arts contribute to the quality of life. 63% that the arts contribute to the economy of the community. and the majority of them believe the arts are important to attract and retain employees. So being part of the arts of the Tallahassee Symphony is good for business, is good for the economy. Most of all, it's good, as John F. Kennedy said, good for the human spirit. So I know that many of you are longstanding supporters of the symphony, and I thank you for that. And those of you who aren't, you should be, because it's good for you, and it's good for them, and everyone will be a lot better off. Anyhow, that's all I wanted to say, so thank you very much. I'm happy to take some questions.